Hey, just a quick note to say thank you for joining me on this episode. If this is your first time or you're a regular listener, please take a minute and rate the show on your chosen platform. A short review helps every show to be more visible to new listeners and provides them with value. So, thank you for being here and for helping out. Thank you.
Success is such a tricky concept, and you're right and agree that it means different things to different people. The more I talk with friends and family even, whatever it means for them, it changes over time. So at any given time of my career, maybe having or creating a project for my portfolio, that was success. So the creative endeavor was success. Some other times was certain financial threshold. Other times is really connecting to people or reconnecting with friends and family. It really changes. For me, it has changed, and it keeps changing every maybe season.
Welcome to the Daring Creativity Podcast, a show about daring to forever explore creativity that isn't about chasing shiny perfection. It's about showing up with all your doubts and imperfections and making them count. It's about becoming more of who you already are. My name is Radim Malinic. I'm a designer, author, and eternally curious human being. I'm talking to a broad range of guests who share their stories of small actions that sparked lifetime discoveries, taking one step towards the thing that made them feel most alive. Let me begin this episode with a question. Are you ready to discover what happens when you dare to create? Today I'm talking to Pablo Honey. He's a designer, creative director, and educator. Born in Galicia, raised in Switzerland, he's also resided in Barcelona and now New York City. For over 2 decades, he's been working for Fortune 100 companies and startups, from traditional media to emerging technologies in constant flux. In our conversation, he talks about his award-winning short stories about escapism, about early pursuits of Adobe Flash, how he spent 3 years working in restaurants while building his design career, which ultimately led him to prestigious roles and campaigns. Pablo also reflects on his multicultural background, sensitivity to overwhelm, and philosophy of ruthless hospitality that shaped his creative leadership. It's my pleasure to welcome Pablo Honey. Hey Pablo, how are you doing?
How are you? Excited to be here.
So, for those who have may never heard of Pablo Honey, how would you describe yourself?
My name is Pablo Honey, and if we go through the traditional professional roles, I suppose, I'm a designer, creative director, and currently head of design at Automattic, the makers of WordPress and other creative tools to be on the web. I work in between multiple disciplines of design, from technology to branding and other things in between. Though I'm not sure I'm all of those things. It's just what I do. I'm just a human, like everyone, full of fears and curiosities. What defines more who I am, I guess, is traveling in between those roles and concepts. So sometimes I'm more of a designer, some other times I'm more a creative, others a manager, an artist, and so on.
I love the way that you say I'm a human, full of fears and curiosity, because you're already setting the bar in the place where I love these conversations to be, they're human conversations, because as you said, like whatever you do defines you at the time when you do it. But after all, we're human trying to sort of make these dots join and make some sort of sense of it and make a journey. Where did it all start? Because you were born in Galicia, but you were raised in Switzerland. Whenever I see your output, whenever I see what you do, I feel like Switzerland has had very big impact on what you become creatively. Have I got it right?
very much. So I was born in this region in the northwest of Spain that historically has been quite poor. So people migrated out. They were migrating out before the Second War, mainly to the Americas. And after the Second War, they were moving up to rebuilding Europe. And my parents migrated in the last wave of that migration, in this case to Switzerland, and that's where I grew up. It was 10 years or happy childhood and so on, surrounded by things that I only recognized much later in my career. When looking back, even traveling back to Switzerland, I was recognizing a lot of things that I loved: architecture, typography, general design and books and signage and so on. And I did realize much later how much of an impact that childhood surrounded by all good design, how that affected my understanding of the profession later on.
What you describe is very much formative years. Like you are at that time a sponge, like as you said, almost like a subconscious sponge. You know, you picked up on a lot of things that made sense a lot later. So what was the age and how was the surrounding?
I moved as a baby when I was a few months in, and was in Bern, the capital of Switzerland, until I was 10, a little bit above 10. So it was 10 years of being the sponge of design and design culture. Again, you're not aware when you're a kid, but then when you're older and follow this path and this profession, you start to self-identify with certain approach and certain sensibility for creativity and design.
I'm just trying to find out concoction of these influences, because obviously you've got your roots, you've got your Spanish roots, you're in Switzerland, and you're on a trajectory to become a creative, curious human, designer, creative director. So I'm trying to find the ideas of what was the initials of the creative spark.
You know, this has been a theme for my entire life. There's this concept that maybe you've heard of called third culture kit, which is basically this state of mind of people who were born in one place but were raised in a different culture, and they live in between those, and there's almost like a limbo space where like they develop their own, which is a mix of both. In my case, it's even a little bit more drastic, because beyond that duality of Spain or Galicia and Switzerland, then I moved into different places. I lived in Barcelona many years before moving to New York City, where I've been 12 years. New York City has been actually the longest I've been in a place. So there's all these tensions in between cultures that ultimately have formed my own profile, my own way of thinking, and my own way of being. But it has, to be honest with you, been always a challenge too, because I was too Spanish to be a Swiss, and I was too Swiss to be a Spanish, and I was too Galician to be in Barcelona, and I'm too Spanish to be in New York City. Translated to disciplines, and perhaps we get to it, but I also understand the profession of design in less of boxes and more in between. So I find also myself too interactive for the graphic designers, too graphic designer for interactive folks. And it's quite funny how I enjoy being in between, but also has been a challenge belonging to groups, cultures, and concepts.
We'll be back after a quick break.
This episode is brought to you by Lux Coffee Co., the first creative specialty coffee company building a platform to shine the light on emerging global talent with a mission to make a positive impact on the creative industry and beyond. Lux Coffee Co. offers exceptional coffee sourced from around the world through ethical and sustainable practices, and you can discover the current range of signature blends and single origins, coffee hardware and accessories, along with exceptional apparel at luxcoffee.co.uk. You can use the code PODCAST to get 15% off your first order. I love how this is all making sense now. You and I have met a couple of times, we have conversations, but I've never heard of the term third culture kid. Would you describe in being too Spanish to be Swiss, be too Swiss to be Spanish, to do Galician to be in Barcelona? To a certain degree, it matters to some people, and to a certain degree, it's a benefit. It's a gift of life, because some people are just too Catalan to be Catalan, and they want to stay Catalan. Some people are just basically hardcore New York. They were always stay hardcore New York. But I think the way you described yourself, like the curious human that's hovering over these different disciplines, it makes sense, because I feel that what you're describing here is definitely a gift of life. It's not always a smooth sailing, thinking, where is home? Where is my friends? Where is my tribe? Where do I belong? Or where do I fit in? But in a way, it has given you, what I'm sensing so far, this incredible gift of actually being a curious human being that transcends these disciplines into something that other people wouldn't potentially have done it. I love describing like two this for that and two this for that, because I don't think you feel that anymore, do you? Because you're not, 10, 20, 25 anymore, because it doesn't really matter what people think, right?
I appreciate you. You say it elegantly that I'm not like so young anymore. And I'm not really. So it doesn't matter too much now. And I do agree with you fully that I appreciate these life experiences as something that are part of me. And it allows me to have perhaps a diverse set of perspectives, or a little bit of richness in the thinking and making. I do embrace it and so on, but it hasn't been smooth. And especially when you are looking for your own identity and forming who you are, what you want to do, and so on, it's challenging to not fully belong to anything, any group. But it is something that I appreciate today.
I'm going to try to trace the creativity in your life, because there's a sort of cultural mixture of all sorts of influences, dissonances and conflicts and frictions. Where does creativity come into this?
I don't know really. It's been a strange experience and case, I suppose. I come from a very humble background. They had to migrate one generation back. They were very poor. So there were no references for me to hold on to for this creative career or develop these creative curiosities. There were no books at my parents' house. Fast forward, I'm obsessed with books now, to an extreme case. I love reading, I love being surrounded by books and so on. No one in my family went to higher education, so I was the first one going to college in my entire lineage, which was a little bit dizzy, to be honest with you. And not having these references invite me today to actually speak up a little bit more and being a little bit more public, to see if there's someone out there, maybe in a very small village like the one that I come from, that can maybe hear us talking and relate to, and just have a little bit of a push forward for them to pursue their curiosities. I really don't know where mine comes from, really. I was a writer as a teenager. I would write a lot. I would read a lot. I was interested in books and magazines. I was back in Galicia. We were living in a very small village. Like there are 50 people living there. There are more cows than people. And I was subscribing to magazines from New York City, mainly design and creative magazines, one from the School of Visual Arts, How Magazine, and so on. And now I laugh about it because someone was sending these magazines to this little village in Galicia. So I had this curiosities all the time about films and stories, and that I'm not sure where they come from really, because I didn't have those references at home.
That's really interesting that in a village where there's more cows than people, you find your way of escapism and started looking for what might be out there in the world, because sometimes we hope that there's a sort of societal influence, or there's someone who will show us the path, or you would try to emulate someone, trying to be as good as someone, like to show us the ways. But you talk about School of Visual Arts, and the loop, mostly the full circle, is that you actually ended up working for School of Visual Arts later, which is a beautiful full circle. But when you said you were the first person from your lineage to go into college, did you have a pushback, or did you have a support, or how did that feel? Because the reason why I ask this, because there's often people on the show talking about almost going against the tide. Like, people are not always happy for someone to go, hey, don't do this thing, because people come up with their own life problems at this situation. Hey, you're gonna do this? Are you sure? Because to them, security looked a lot different to the unknown as presented. So, how was it for you? Did you have that support?
Full support. I was very lucky to have the parents and the family I have, because they had this vision without knowing to support me in this journey. So they were fully supportive of me going to college and doing what I've done later, even just quitting my job in Galicia and moving to Barcelona without a job. And they were super, super supportive, despite the pain of them seeing, again, someone in their lineage moving out, right, migrating out. That was a little bit painful, especially for my dad, because that generation was dreaming of coming back home and like developing a life there without their kids to needing to move out. But I had a lot of support from my family beyond their understanding. And I celebrate this duality I've experienced and I have from this esoteric rural context to this modernist, fast city of New York City. And I try to embrace both, and both were formative and are part of who I am and how I understand the world and even the profession.
You said you were a writer in your teenage years. Do you remember what stories you were writing? What was the narrative that you were putting together? Was it escapism? Was it projections? What did you write about?
Both were about escaping, actually. So I had, and I say both because I wrote a lot of things, but specifically 2 short stories were published when I was a teenager. They were part of a contest and they made it to be finalists, and then they were published in subsequent books, and which I was very happy about, and that inspired me to perhaps pursue a writer career. I realize as you speak that both stories are about escapism, just being discomfort with staying boxed.
I think what have you described so far, it all makes perfect sense. That those stories were reflection potentially of the subconscious trying to come out and go, there's something else waiting. So, and again, you were award-winning from a very young age now, right? Being chosen to have your stories published. That's remarkable when you think about it. Just because the longing is pushing out, it started something. So I have to ask you, from creative side of things, do you remember the very first thing that you ever designed? What was that first breadcrumb that you picked up and go, you know what, this is quite interesting. I want to do more of this.
It's funny that you asked this, because I've been in a recent journey of, it's almost like an archaeologic journey of compiling all my work over 25 years. And as I'm compiling all that work and archiving all that work, I found this very first logo that I designed like ages ago. And I see today so many mistakes made, but I still like it. There's something fresh about it. There's something unapologetic about it. And, without knowing even, there's a lot of that connection with Switzerland. There's a bit of being cruel in it and so on. So I look at it, I might actually fix it a little bit just for self-indulgence, I suppose. But I was very surprised to see it and still like it today.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I mean, I'm very impressed that you've got the very first logo still somewhere, because somehow personally quite happy to have got rid of all the evidence that I used to suck. Or maybe I was a genius, who knows? But let's talk about the first logo a little bit more, because how did you get to do that logo? Somebody must have asked you to do this. And to do this, you must have told someone, I can do this for you. So on the concept of daring creativity, step one, how did you get your first logo commission?
I think I was perhaps like first year of college, and I was a little bit of a weird guy back then, and I was doing a lot of video experiments, and I was starting to play around video performances and things of that nature. So you can see that I was like getting into strange places, even with no awareness and understanding of the medium. But in that context, and as well connected to the short stories I had written, someone who became a dear friend, and we were friends, for so long, found those stories in a library, in a local library, and realized that he needed to meet this kid that was writing these strange stories and was doing these strange things with video. And he was involved in Galician, but I guess, I don't know what the translation exactly is, but it's a association of vets in Galicia, specifically for cows and like larger animals. And they were creating this association, and he asked me to create some branding for it, I guess, before we understood what branding was, or I understood what branding was. So that there I go, I create this logo. Fast forward, I create this flash presentation for the whole association, which I do have a video of, and I'm a little bit embarrassed by, but it's still like pretty fantastic to be able to have less constraints and be a little bit free with the medium back then, when I suppose the web and digital were a little bit more fun.
I mean, what a story. And I mean, what an assignment. Like, Association for Vets, now specializing in livestock, obviously in a place where there's more cows than people on average. That makes all perfect sense. But Flash, I mean, it almost feels like a sort of this Twilight Zone that Flash could have came, caused chaos, riot, let everyone rip loose. I mean, Flash was basically, I think, invented so designers can show other designers what can you do with Flash in a way of showing them Flash skills, confusing everyone, everybody else. But Flash is, I think, it's a perfect segue, because you moved to Barcelona because of certain festival. And it was only the other day I found out that OFF stands for Offline Flash Fest. What was it? Offline Film Flash Festival, or something like that. I think that's the actual definition of OFF. Because I'm thinking, what a cool name. I'm like, what does it stand for? And I literally just a few days ago was like, oh, that's what it is. Which reminds me, FITC was Flash in a can. There was a lot of Flash festivals. There are still festivals where Flash is nowhere near to be found. So a complicated, silly segue into you moving to Barcelona because of a festival called OFF, right?
That's pretty much it, yes. Before finishing college, I already had a job at a small graphic design studio. I had a regular life, I had a job, I had, family clothes, car, home, whatnot. But I was still involved with this video experimentation, VJing, doing video installations, interactive installations, and so forth, and decided to visit Barcelona to attend this crazy event called OFF that a friend of us founded, Hector Ayuso, and now is continued by Pep. And I attend this festival, and suddenly I see this Japanese guy on stage, Yugo Nakamura, known as Yugo, presenting these visual poems created in Flash, interactive pieces of graphic design that were moving and reacting to input. And it just blew my mind for some reason. You know, sometimes like something just triggers your mind. And it kind of made me move to Barcelona. So I quit my job, quit my life in Galicia, and moved to Barcelona, knowing that I had to pursue something similar to what Hugo was doing.
How did that go?
Pretty good, I think. I moved to Barcelona without knowing anybody, and so some fears hitting there. But I had a very raw and different profile and portfolio, even because I was not coming from traditional graphic design school, and started to show my portfolio around really while I was working at a restaurant to survive. So worked at a restaurant for about 3 years. Even when I got a job, and I had a job in an agency, and I was still working at the restaurant. So I worked for 3 years. I worked every day of the week, basically going between the agency and the restaurants and the weekends, until a point where I got an offer to teach at the Institute of European Design, and then I had to choose. I had to choose a career, and I chose, design and creativity, and I was teaching and also at the agency, and an agency that was very pioneering back then with Flash and interactivity called W. So in general, it was pretty scary to move into Barcelona without knowing anyone and so on. But then after working hard, being in the right place, having a little bit of luck, I developed my career in that agency. And the work that I developed there got the attention of RGA New York. And at the peak of the agency, they made me an offer to come to this fantastic city to work for Nike, which I couldn't refuse. So overall, that experience in OFF triggered a step forward and a motion forward that brought me to this day. So thank you to OFF.
Thank you to OFF, but mainly thank you to Flash. I mean, Flash was the enabler. Flash produced something you saw on a screen or on a stage. I fell in love with it. Okay, I'm moving here. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm a big advocate of moving to places where you don't know anyone, because you can start the story afresh, and you can actually focus on what you want to do, because you don't have that stability, that security. It makes you, I think, work twice as hard. I mean, in your case, you were working in a restaurant for 3 years, and it gives you that foundation. I think it would be wrong to say like it makes you a bit more hungry. Actually, it makes you more determined to make it happen, because you can't almost take it easy. What I really want to know is, what have you learned in those 3 years of being in a restaurant? Because you come into contact with the public every single day. What was your role, and what have you learned that you actually still use today?
First of all, I feel a little bit old as we talk about Flash. But moving from it, and without nostalgia, what I learned working at the restaurant, which is still my family. Actually, I call them my Catalan family, and every time I go to Barcelona, of course, the whole neighborhood is appreciative of me being there, and vice versa. So I have a love story with that restaurant still today. The restaurant, by the way, is called Cinco Hermanos, Five Brothers. It's in one of the larger neighborhoods in Barcelona, in the north of the city. And the two things perhaps that I learned is, first of all, hospitality. being welcoming, nice to people, comforting, and it quite connects to the work I do in design. And we should be thinking about design and how you guide someone through experiences, how you make someone understand communication and so on. So walking and working with people to have wonderful experiences. So I think ruthless hospitality, almost, that's one learning. The other learning is that you gotta work hard. And perhaps that's something I'm still inheriting from my parents as a mental program, where you have this survival mechanism that makes you propel forward constantly. And we have to check on that, right? Because it can be also risky to only move with that survival mechanism. But I think one thing I learned as well is that you gotta work hard. And I never believed that I had something more special than others. In fact, joining RGA from a small village, from not fancy cop schools, and it was an adventure. But one thing I had is the hardworking spirit. And that, I inherited, as I said, that from my parents and my family, as well as from experiences like working in a restaurant.
I love that you use the words ruthless hospitality, which makes me believe that you haven't heard of the book about hospitality, which is called Unreasonable Hospitality, right? Because you use ruthless. And what was really interesting, because the day you were doing a talk at Mucho, just a few weeks ago, I was walking to Mucho a few hours earlier to have a lunch with Pablo, another Pablo. And I was trying to decipher, I wanted to announce my new book, the one we're talking about on this podcast. I wanted to announce it, and I had this idea of a complicated cover, like sort of moving words and that kind of stuff. And I saw a Spanish copy of Unreasonable Hospitality looking at me from some bookshop on my walk. And I'm like, yeah, it's time to keep it simple. It's time to keep it simple. This cover can just do with the words being written. You don't have to do any nonsense, like just keep it simple. And Unreasonable Hospitality, which I've read not that long ago, is a fantastic book about just like how you do just that one thing so much better than anybody else. What you get known for and what you do. So the way you said ruthless, I quite like it, because that kind of takes it another step, like a step forward. Yes, it's meant to be ruthless. I love how all of this is sort of beautifully taking us into, your new chapter with RGA, because that's a step up. Like, we're going from someone who, again, I love the fact that there's more cows than people. I know this is the last time I'm going to say it, but we're going through that setting which you would not see yourself being in that position, potentially thinking, I'm sure you might attest to it, like potentially thinking all of that work that's amazing is done by some other people. It's not done by people like me or by a lot of people like us or people from this place. Only to find yourself getting an offer, going, yeah, we're going to New York, saying, I'm not that special. Whereas there is something special about everyone who gets the offer like this, because it would employ a fool, someone who's not into ruthless hospitality or into working hard, kind of thinking, I'm going to here and actually do really good work. So we are now in New York. RG offers is accepted. There's a Nike account. What happens?
I don't know. Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just like moving forward. It was quite a journey. RGA has been formative as well. And I moved really quickly with my broken English and my naive view of the city and business and so on. But again, I think being curious, being hardworking, being open as well to learn and being a sponge constantly is something that I continued doing at RGA. And I was there for about 6 years and moved quite quickly through it, launching and making really good work with other people and learning from others, and also helping a lot of young designers to develop their own paths.
You said moving forward. Moving forward is one of the titles, one of the working titles for the book, moving forward, because that's what we do. I'm trying to sort of think about it out loud right now, but if you're not thinking about the next step, you are almost falling behind, if that makes sense. I mean, I've learned to be careful about the words sometimes when you see other people and thinking, why don't you want to do this? Some people are just happy to be the thing they are now, and they're more happy to be doing the thing for the next 20 years because we need people like them. But I think we are aligned on this philosophy as moving forward and doing it with the way that, like, there is something else. There's another thing.
There's something about moving forward that is undeniably positive. And there's also a dangerous side of it. I think you and I, alongside Stefan Tagmeister, we talked at Paradiso not so long ago about chasing the next and why we are so obsessed with it. And I do find myself relating to that dichotomy of moving forward and as well like questioning yourself why we are yet again thinking about what's next. I had a lot of next already, and I need to check myself when I'm propelling my mind forward too much and thinking about the next ambition versus also enjoying the present. And so I don't have a lesson to give, but it's still like a good discussion to continue, because we are in today's society, we are a bit obsessed with next.
You said you don't have a lesson about this, but you said it's undeniably positive. I think that is the lesson. I mean, yes, we are obsessed with the next if we are sort of impatient about the now, but having that something about the next, like seeing the 2 steps forward of seeing, and I call it like a driving in the dark versus, seeing ahead for a mile. Like moving forward could feel like driving in the dark, but when you know that there's a destination you're getting to, actually looks after that happiness, because I think looks after that satisfaction, it looks after our definition of success. Because if you don't know where you're getting, it's almost like an example of like short-term projects. Now, people who have 50 short-term projects will dream about one long-term project. And there's a person with a long-term project are longing for 50 small projects because they don't have that dopamine hit about finishing something. Whereas the people with the 50 are like, this is chaos. I need some order to this. So it's just, again, we're on those scales of life, never really been happy with one or the other because you always want the other thing. Whereas on that mission of moving forward and thinking, actually being accountable to yourself and thinking, well, there's another thing that makes me excited. And what is the price to pay, or the price to give for not doing so? Because you said, I need to check myself if I'm thinking too much ahead. And I'm like, okay, if it stops you from enjoying the present, maybe, but I see it as a gift.
It could be a gift. It's also fun and entertaining to project yourself somehow, but I do try to force myself into enjoying more today and the present and what I already achieved or what I did or the people I inspired, perhaps, and try to appreciate both the present and also still entertaining myself with projecting into the future.
The panel that you mentioned between you, me, and Stefan was titled, Are we afraid to be happy? Are we bending the flat line of our own success? And success is such a diverse, multifaceted word when you think about it. Like the success should mean just the one thing, but success to everybody means a totally different thing. In your case, what is your definition of success?
Wow.
You got all the time you want.
Do we have another hour?
You can have a couple if you want.
Success is such a tricky concept, and you're right and agree that it means different things to different people. The more I talk with friends and family even, whatever it means for them, it changes over time. So at any given time of my career, maybe having or creating a project for my portfolio, that was success. So the creative endeavor was success. Some other times was certain financial threshold. Other times is really connecting to people or reconnecting with friends and family. It really changes. For me, it has changed, and it keeps changing every maybe season. And I'm currently in a phase where I'm appreciating a lot, connecting and reconnecting with friends, people that share certain fears and curiosities, and also people that don't agree with me. So I'm in this process of maybe coming out of my cave a little bit because I've been quite shy and focused on my own work, that I forgot that there's a world out there that I can be part of and share a story. As I said, maybe inspire someone who is in a small village.
I love how you're thinking about it. I love how you go through the stages, because success initially could be very selfish, and then you can be a little bit generous with like how you perceive success. And then you realize that success is totally unreliant on other people, totally unreliant on anything else. Because again, you've said it beautifully, so success changes. Like, no, there's a different sort of definition to it, because we look for that external validation so much at the beginning. And you mentioned success would be like creating something about portfolio, and like how much we're obsessed about portfolio. So much. And I'm like, have you got portfolio? It doesn't really matter anymore, because I believe my current definition of success outside of family life is actually being able to speak to people, actually share the philosophies and make sense and work on storytelling, and actually do more with just sharing of our ideas and sharing of our experiences, because that's going to give someone a lot more inspiration, or potentially take someone even further beyond just a pretty piece of work that might look obsolete in 5, 10, 15 years, you know? So I think what we do currently as an industry, especially with the circles that we are connected with, I think that is a success. I think we are really opening doors to that sort of emotional sharing sort of economy, if that makes sense, by inspiring people actually going and doing something for their benefit. Because in your work, and every time I see you, I have to ask you, like, you really manage people, no? You really manage 80 designers, and especially when I found out they're in 23 countries, working in 25 languages. I'm like, right, you just called yourself shy, or used to be shy. How would you do all of this? Because that's a hell of a lot of people to manage and keep inspired, keep in check, keep them motivated. Of course, I'm sure you don't speak to every single one of them every day, but like, you're now a design leader, and I want to know how you do it.
Well, first of all, probably not excelling at it. I'm still a craft person at heart, so there's always that tension between the management and being a craft person. At a given moment, you can find me designing an icon or, whatnot, and that might take time from managing. I'm also lucky enough that there are like other people around that are better at it and also share the responsibility of guiding such a large team. On top of it, it's fully remote, so it's quite hard at times because we or I miss a lot that live connection and that live creativity that sparks when we are together and so on. And we still try to do that, like flying a lot over to places where we can meet and work together. So I think, how do I do it, or how do we do it? We probably need to document it at some point. But I think the key of it is probably shared by many others that you interviewed so far, is having great people. And I'm lucky that there are great people at Automattic, not just skilled and talented, but also gracious and super kind. It's probably like the kindest group of humans I've ever worked with. So that makes it quite easy. I think it's sometimes hard because there are a lot of silences in a remote culture, and I'm also shy myself and so on. But it's much easier when you choose, or they choose you, but you choose the right people and the kindest people.
It's a beautiful thing that you said, no? It's the kindness. And people that you are surrounded by kind people. That makes everything half as difficult as it should be, which, that's already a definition of success. You said you were shy quite a few times, but I've met you when you did talk just, in the earlier slot of Barcelona in front of a few thousand people. We all get nerves. We don't want to be on the stage. We dream to be on the stage, but something helps you to break through that barrier. So would you say that your definition of shyness is connected to that Galician kid in Switzerland, Swiss like kid in Galicia? Would you say there's some sort of way of being perceived by others that makes you think that way? Because the more I think about shyness, there's something else behind it. There's more vulnerabilities and more potentially shame, but you've made it far enough that you've broke through that seal. So do you have an understanding where that come from?
I certainly have two modes. One in which you've seen me on stage in front of 3,000, 5,000 people, and I can breeze through it, especially if I know what I'm talking about. And the story is something I can own and I understand and likely I've built and so on. So I feel confident in what I do. There's the other mode that is this kid from Galicia that grew up in Switzerland that is often, and perhaps not many people know this, but is often overwhelmed by a stimuli. And I'm very sensitive to visual noise itself, and so on. So I don't enjoy crowds for too long because I'm constantly scanning and listening to what is happening. And if you think of it, it becomes really tiring after some time. So I retreat myself into my silences and my meditations and my solo times to recover from those busy instances in which I'm also happy and I enjoy being around friends and people I learn from and so on. But it does force me to find these two modes where, I can be in a busy environment and also I need to find those quiet settings.
I think a lot of people, if they go this far in the conversation, which I hope they have, will find a lot of value in this, because the overwhelm, again, is another multifaceted beast. It comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Most of it is self-inflicted. Sometimes you just can't really do anything about it because you want to be part of that conversation. You go to a place which is busy, noisy, overwhelming, because that's where the next chapter might be. And in your case, when you talk about busy place, I can only think, for example, my experience is off. It's a Disneyland. It's incredible. But the recovery time from that is just overstimuli, isn't it? It's overstimulated. There's so much. Yet we need it. But how do you tap into the right amount of what you can do with it? Because, it's like balance between, when I'm thinking for gymnastics, the perfect dismount, you've got such degree of precision, it's just if you get something wrong, it can look not wrong. I'm talking about dismounts when it comes to creative crowds, but it's so, to get this right, it sometimes could be out of its own. I think, sometimes I envy the people who go too often. They're there for 3 days. They go home on Monday. And I'm like, I'm already flying Saturday evening. I can't do even the third day, And so that is that. But glad you talked about it because I think it's so relevant, because sometimes people don't know how to perceive their shyness, perceive that sort of their own being in that busy, not busy space, or with authoritative people in the room, because I think things like shyness and imposter syndrome and introversy is often misunderstood. Sometimes it's undiagnosed, unspecified. And I think be self-label sometimes in a way that it's helpful because you don't have to deal with it for quite a while. And that's when the escapism comes in and potentially can be sort of creatively helpful. But then we go back in and we're like, yeah, I can't do this because, I'm still shy or some introvert. But because you said what was interesting, what you said was like, I can do the talk because I know what I'm talking about. But when I don't know the situation, I'm scanning. I think this is two things. You can hold your peace and hold your story because you're in control of it. And then when you're not, it's like it's all out there and exhausting.
It can be very exhausting. At the same time, I see a positive flip to it because it helps you, at least it helped me learn much faster because you're constantly scanning and listening actively and digesting a lot of information at the same time. So there's a learning upside. Then the other aspect that I see positive is something I experienced often with people I work with, where I'm reviewing a piece of work or we are collaborating on something and I can see a lot of things at the same time. So there's always a flip side to it. Over the years, I've been able to manage it much better. And at the same time, I think it has that flip side that allowed me to learn much faster and also provide feedback and guidance on a lot of details at the same time.
I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. My last question to you in this, I'm processing what you've told me for the last hour because it's I love it. But my question is, before I let you go, is it kind of goes back to the beginning. You were too Galician to be Swiss to be Galician, too Galician to be Catalan, then too Spanish to be in New York. Where is home? What is the definition of home for you? And is there something new on the horizon? Are you happy where you are and keeping yourself in check about your current successes and current place? Or is your mind onto the next thing? Where's home?
Do we have another hour? I think it's a fantastic question. Home to me is where my feet are. And at the same time, it means that I feel at home in motion. And I feel at home on a plane where I'm very creative and feel very comfortable, unlike other people. But it goes by stages, I suppose. I can call New York City home. It's the place I lived the longest in my life. And despite some distance with certain things, like I feel very comfortable here. And I'm lucky enough to be working with some freedom to move. And I spent a fair amount of time back home in Galicia and Spain, where I also feel at home. So it's a difficult question to answer when home is not a place, but it's a state of mind and always in transition.
You may have called it a difficult question to answer, but you've answered it beautifully because home is where your feet are. It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And I'm so happy we've met. I'm so happy we've had this conversation and all the other conversations we've had in the past and the conversation we will have in the future, because there's so much we have in common. And I just hope that, people have listened to the conversation all the way to here, because it's been beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Daring Creativity Podcast. I'd love to know your thoughts, questions, and suggestions. So please get in touch via the email in the show notes or social channels. This episode was produced and presented by me, Radim Malinic. The audio production was done by Neil Mackay from 7 Million Bags Podcast. Thank you, and I hope to see you on the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode and would like more accessible resources to help you discover your daring creativity, you can pick up one of my books on themes of mindful creativity, creative business, branding, and graphic design. Every physical book purchase comes with a free digital bundle including an ebook and audiobook to make the content accessible wherever you are and whatever you do. To get 10% of your order, visit novemberuniverse.co.uk and use the code podcast. Have a look around and start living daringly.